My daughter was marrying a millionaire, but his parents banned me from the wedding for being poor. So I posted the whole truth on Facebook and destroyed their $1 million company. I'm 50 years old. I've been selling real estate for like 20 years. And I need to tell you what happened a few months ago with my daughter's wedding, because I still can't believe things went that far. The thing is, my daughter Victoria, who's 26, was going to marry Benjamin, a guy who seemed decent at first. You know, polite, hardworking. One of those guys who gives you a good impression when you meet them. But what I didn't know was that his family, I mean his parents specifically, were going to turn what should have been one of the happiest days of our lives into a complete nightmare. I guess I should start at the beginning so you understand the full context. My husband died when Victoria was 10, a car accident that basically changed our lives overnight. And from that moment on, I was both mom and dad at the same time. It wasn't easy. Not at all. There were nights when I wondered how I was going to pay rent, and at the same time help her with homework. But we did it, the two of us, together. I worked double shifts selling houses. Sometimes I'd show properties until 9 at night. Then I'd come home and make whatever dinner I could. Nothing fancy but made with love. You know? Victoria grew up seeing all that, seeing me struggle. And I always thought that made her stronger, more aware of how the real world works. When Victoria met Benjamin like 3 years ago, I thought he was fine. He was an engineer, had his life together, and most importantly, he treated her well, made her laugh, and after everything we'd been through together, I just wanted to see her happy. What I didn't know at the time was that Benjamin's family was, how do I put this? Ridiculously wealthy. Not wealthy like they have a big house, but wealthy like they own a PR firm that handles $1 million accounts and live in one of those mansions you see in magazines. Benjamin's parents, basically his dad and his mom, owned this super successful PR agency. And from the beginning, they looked at me like I was, I don't know, trash on their expensive shoes. The first time I went to their house, and when I say house, I mean a property with like 6 bedrooms and a pool that looked like it belonged to a hotel, Benjamin's mom, who I don't even remember what her name was because she never properly introduced herself, looked me up and down and asked me, "What do you do, Rebecca?" I told her I sold houses, and she made this face like, "Oh, I see," and then changed the subject to talk to Benjamin about some investment they were making or something. It was awkward, very awkward. But I thought, well, maybe she's having a bad day. People have a right to be in a bad mood, right? But no. Turns out that was her normal mode. Every time we saw each other, which wasn't very often because Victoria basically avoided family gatherings with them, they treated me like I was invisible or like I wasn't good enough to be in the same room. Benjamin's dad at least pretended to be polite. He'd ask me generic questions, like, "How's the real estate market?" But I could see in his eyes that he didn't really care about my answer. What hurt me most was that Benjamin never confronted them. He just stood there and let them treat me that way. And when I mentioned that to Victoria once, she told me, "Oh, Mom, that's just how they are. Don't take it personally." But how could I not take it personally when they're making you feel like less than nothing? Fast forward to like 6 months ago. Benjamin proposed to Victoria. She said yes, obviously, and they started all the wedding preparations. I was excited, honestly, because my only daughter was getting married, and after all the difficult years we went through together, we were finally going to have something to celebrate. Victoria told me the wedding was going to be at a really nice place, a private club that Benjamin's family frequented, and I started saving to buy myself a decent dress because I wanted to look good for my daughter's day. I spent like $400 on a navy blue dress I found on sale. Nothing spectacular, but it fit me well, and it made me feel pretty. One day, I think it was April or maybe May, I don't remember exactly, Victoria came to my house. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's comfortable and clean. And she arrived with a face I'd never seen on her before. She sat on the couch, that gray couch I bought at IKEA like 5 years ago, and stayed quiet for a long while. I asked her, "What's wrong, Victoria? Are you okay?" And she started crying, but not a normal cry. One of those cries that come out when you're devastated inside. What she told me next was like getting punched in the stomach. She said, "Mom, Benjamin's parents don't want you to come to the wedding." I sat there processing those words because they didn't make sense. "What do you mean they don't want me to come to my own daughter's wedding?" I asked her, "Why? What did I do?" And she looked at me with red eyes and told me something I'll never forget. She said they think you don't fit in with their friends and family. that you're too different from them, that your job and lifestyle aren't at their level. She was basically telling me I was too poor, too ordinary, too working class to be at their precious wedding. I couldn't breathe properly. I asked Victoria, "And what did you say when they told you that?" She stayed quiet, and that was all the answer I needed. My own daughter, the girl I raised alone for 16 years, the girl I sacrificed everything for, hadn't defended me. She told me Benjamin was trying to convince his parents that there was still hope, but I knew that was a lie. If Benjamin really wanted me there, he would simply invite me and that's it, but he was choosing to keep his classist parents happy instead of doing the right thing. Victoria left that night, and I stayed alone in my apartment, crying like I hadn't cried. Since my husband died, I felt like everything I'd worked for, all the sacrifices I'd made, meant nothing. I had broken my back to give Victoria a good life, to make sure she never lacked anything, and now she was telling me I wasn't good enough to be at her wedding. Can you believe it? I spent days not sleeping well, turning the whole thing over in my head, wondering what I'd done wrong, how I'd gotten to this point. After like a week of being emotionally destroyed, something changed in me. The sadness turned into rage, into pure indignation. I thought, you know what? I'm not going to stay quiet while this family treats me like garbage. If they want to humiliate me, if they want to treat me like I'm worth nothing, then the world is going to know exactly what kind of people they are. And that's when I decided to write it all on Facebook. I sat at my computer, a Dell laptop I've had for like 4 years, and started writing. It wasn't something short, like a sad paragraph looking for attention, but I wrote the whole complete story. I explained how I'd raised Victoria alone after my husband died, how I'd worked double shifts to give her everything she needed, how I'd supported her in everything. Then I explained how Benjamin's family had treated me from the beginning, all the times they made me feel inferior, all the contemptuous looks, all the passive-aggressive comments. And finally, I told how they'd banned me from attending my own daughter's wedding because I didn't fit in with their social circle of rich people. And here comes the part that maybe went too far. But honestly, at that moment, I didn't care. I tagged Benjamin's parents in the post. I looked up their Facebook profiles, which of course had photos of them at elegant events and expensive trips, and I tagged them directly, so that they and all their friends could see exactly what kind of people they were behind their perfect image. I hit the publish button and felt a mix of fear and relief, like when you finally say something you've been holding in for a long time. I didn't expect what happened next. Within hours. And when I say hours, I mean like 3 or 4. The post had been shared like 200 times. Friends of mine, friends of friends, people I didn't even know, started commenting, expressing their support. They said things like, "This is outrageous. That family should be ashamed. You're an incredible mother and you don't deserve this treatment." Some even shared their own stories of being discriminated against by rich and elitist people. The post kept growing. 500 shares, 1,000 shares, 5,000 shares. There were people from other states commenting. Local media started contacting me asking if they could do a story about this. By the second day, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I had like 50 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize until I finally answered. It was Benjamin's dad, and I could hear the panic in his voice. He told me, "Rebecca, please, I need you to delete that post immediately." I asked him why I should do that, and he started talking fast, saying this was affecting his PR, firm's reputation, that clients were asking about the situation, that this could ruin them financially. He begged me, literally begged me, to have compassion and delete the post. You know what I felt in that moment? Satisfaction. Pure satisfaction. That finally, these people who had treated me like garbage were suffering consequences for their actions. I told him, "Now you care what I think? Now I'm important enough for you to call me?" But when it came to inviting me to my daughter's wedding, I wasn't good enough, right? He tried to justify himself, saying they'd made a mistake, that it had all been a misunderstanding, but I didn't believe him one bit. I told him I wasn't going to delete anything and hung up the phone. He called me like 10 more times that day, but I blocked his number. Then Victoria called me, crying again, and this time she was hysterical, and she yelled at me. How could I have done that? That I'd ruined her life, that now Benjamin's family blamed her for everything. She begged me to delete the post, saying she was asking me please, that she was my daughter and I should care more about her happiness than my pride. That hurt me. I'm not going to lie, because she was framing this like I was the villain, when all I did was defend myself against people who had treated me horribly. I told her, "Victoria, I didn't ruin anything. They ruined it when they decided your mother wasn't good enough to be at your wedding." And I hung up. The following weeks were total chaos. The post reached like 30,000 shares. It appeared on local news blogs. Some national media even mentioned the story as an example of class discrimination in the United States. But what really made everything explode was that former employees of Benjamin's parents' PR firm started coming forward and sharing their own stories. A girl, I think her name was Sarah or something like that, wrote a long post about how Benjamin's parents had treated her horribly when she worked for them, paying her below minimum wage and making her work until midnight without overtime pay. Other employees came out with similar stories, and suddenly this wasn't just about me being excluded from a wedding anymore, but about an entire family with a pattern of treating people they considered inferior badly. Benjamin called me trying to be the mediator. He told me in a calm voice, "Rebecca, I understand you're hurt. I really do. But this has gotten out of control. Victoria is devastated. My parents are getting death threats on the internet. The wedding is in jeopardy, and all this because of a post." I asked him, "All this because of a post? Or all this because of years of you treating me like garbage and thinking you could get away with it?" He stayed quiet and then told me he was doing this for Victoria, that she didn't deserve this, that I was hurting her more than his parents. I told him Victoria had the chance to defend me and didn't, and now everyone had to live with the consequences of their decisions. He also called me several times after, but I stopped answering. The wedding, which was scheduled for June, was postponed indefinitely. Victoria stopped talking to me completely, which broke my heart more than I can explain. I'm her mom, the only family she really has, and now she wouldn't even answer my text messages. Days went by, and I alternated between feeling justified and feeling terrible. On one hand, I had exposed horrible people who deserved to be exposed, but on the other hand, I'd lost my daughter in the process, and that was killing me inside. Like 3 weeks after the original post, I received a text message from Victoria. It simply said, "We got married yesterday." She attached a photo of her and Benjamin in what looked like a courthouse office, her in a simple white dress and him in a suit. Nothing fancy, just the two of them and what I assume was a witness. They had eloped and gotten married without telling anyone, not me or his parents. My first reaction was to cry, because I'd missed my daughter's wedding day, something I'd dreamed about since she was little. But I also felt some relief because at least they'd gotten married on their own terms, without the influence of Benjamin's parents. Turns out when Benjamin's parents found out about the secret marriage, his dad did something nobody expected. He called Benjamin and basically told him he was disowning him. That if he wanted to be with a girl whose mother had ruined their reputation, then he should do it alone, without a penny from the family. Benjamin, to his credit, told him that was fine, that he'd rather be with Victoria than have their dirty money. Victoria told me that later, and it was the first time I felt some respect for Benjamin, because he'd finally had the balls to stand up to his parents. 1 month after all this drama, on a Saturday afternoon, I heard someone knocking on my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole and almost fell over in shock. When I saw Victoria and Benjamin standing there, I opened the door slowly and both of them looked at me with faces of genuine regret. Victoria's eyes were swollen like she'd been crying the whole way there, and Benjamin looked tired, like he hadn't slept well in weeks. Victoria spoke first. She told me, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I don't have words to express it. I should have defended you from day one. I should have told Benjamin's parents that if you weren't going to the wedding, then there wouldn't be a wedding. I should have been the daughter you deserved after everything you did for me." She was crying as she spoke, and I started crying too, because those were exactly the words I needed to hear. Benjamin also apologized, said he'd been a coward, that he should have treated me like family from the beginning instead of allowing his parents to humiliate me. I let them in, and we sat on that same gray couch where it had all started months earlier. We talked for hours, probably like 4 or 5 hours nonstop. They explained everything that had happened, how Benjamin's family had basically fallen apart after the scandal, how they'd lost several important clients, how his parents now barely spoke to them. Victoria told me they'd moved to a small apartment, that Benjamin had gotten a job at another engineering company, and that basically they were starting from zero without the family money. And honestly, even though part of me was still hurt, another part was proud. Proud that Victoria had finally found her backbone, proud that Benjamin had chosen my daughter over his toxic family, proud that in the end they'd done the right thing even though it had cost them everything. I told them I forgave them, that I would always be their mom no matter what, but that I needed time to heal completely from everything that had happened. Since that day, Victoria and I have been rebuilding our relationship little by little. We meet for lunch every 2 weeks. Sometimes she comes to my house and we cook together like we used to when she was younger. Benjamin also comes sometimes and we've developed a decent relationship. Nothing deep yet, but at least there's no longer that horrible tension there was before. They tell me about their life together, about the apartment they're fixing up with their own money, about the plans they have for the future. The Facebook post is still there. I never deleted it, and I probably never will. From time to time, I get messages from people who find it and tell me it inspired them to stand up to people who treat them badly. Benjamin's parents' PR firm survived but never fully recovered its reputation, and as far as I know, they still don't talk to Benjamin. Victoria says she sometimes misses some things about her old life, the financial security mainly, but that she's happier now living authentically than when she was trying to fit into a world that forced her to leave her own mother behind. Did I do the right thing by exposing that family publicly? Honestly, I still don't know. There are days when I think maybe I went too far, that maybe I should have handled things more privately, that maybe it wasn't worth losing months without talking to my daughter. But then I remember how I felt when Victoria told me I couldn't go to her wedding, that feeling of being worthless, that all my sacrifices didn't matter, and I feel like I had the right to defend myself. People like Benjamin's parents, people who have money and power and use it to make others feel bad, need to be exposed, need to face consequences for their actions. At the end of the day, I guess what matters is that Victoria and I are okay now. It's not perfect. It probably never will be. And she had to learn some painful lessons about loyalty and family, but she's with someone who finally showed he loves her enough to choose her over everything else, and I got my daughter back. That's all that really matters, right? Everything else, the drama, the scandal, the thousands of Facebook shares, in the end, it's just noise. What remains is that we're mother and daughter and we found our way back to each other despite everything.